All right. So let's take it one step further. I need to keep an eye on the time because there's so much I want to share with you. Three main areas of growth have been identified. So perception of self, relationships, and philosophy of life. And I think this is interesting. And it links to the post-traumatic growth inventory, which was mentioned on the previous slide, that it's been validated across different cultures. And I'll share with you what some of the questions are in a little while. So if you think about these changes of where I might grow, if we think about the changes in perception of self, so it might be that people see a positive outcome of how they're dealing with their difficulties, as in, I never thought I could handle this, but I can. Or I've handled this, now I can handle anything. I'm a better person now because I've realized what's important in life, those sorts of things. So this is about changes in my perception of myself. What's important for me? Do I feel stronger? Do I feel able to handle this, etc.? Not quite the same. I can't suggest my bungee jump was a trauma, although it did take me 5 hours to do it. But when I'd finished that, I absolutely said, now I've done that, I can do anything. And that's, as I say, I'm not suggesting my bungee jump was a trauma, although it actually did feel really traumatic at the time. It's probably about the only thing I've experienced that I would have classified as trauma, ironically. But this is what we're talking about, changes in perception of self. Now, this can be really useful to understand if we're trying to help somebody from a therapeutic perspective, counseling perspective, of how do they see themselves as changed by this? What can they grow, etc.? Yeah, thank you, Narelle. And I think it's given us some guideposts, if you like, that can be really helpful. Okay, so this is changes in perceptions of self. Then we've got changes in relationships with others. And this is, again, really interesting. And we heard some of this even during COVID. People said it brought them closer together. I know it sounds really weird, but I know for myself, during all the lockdowns, so my family's in South Australia, and they were barely locked down. Sorry, anybody in South Australia, you barely got locked down at all. But when they were, it was my mum's 75th birthday. And I had the best time with my family, better than I've ever had face to face. We all agreed we're going to have dinner, and we're going to eat dinner while we chatted. And then I sent cupcakes to my aunt and her partner, my sister and my nephew. And no, Sue, definitely not. And my mum and dad. And I sent everybody cupcakes, and I got cupcakes. And then we played Yahtzee. And what was really lovely is because we were all virtual, it evened the playing field. They weren't in one room with just us virtual, etc. And we had the best time. It was probably the most fun that I can say I've ever had with my family. It was hilarious. And again, I'm certainly not saying lockdown was traumatic for me personally. I did not experience it as trauma. Sometimes my family might be. But what we're talking about here is it can change the relationship. When you experience trauma, you may find that it shifts family relationships. It shifts friends relationships. Maybe you realize who your real friends are, or you connect with people who can understand you. And some of you, I'm sure, will understand this. Social media has been found to be really beneficial for people in what they call a minority group, as in, if I have experienced breast cancer and I connect online with other people who've experienced breast cancer, it can bring that sense of closeness. And that's exactly one of the things they found is a key element around post-traumatic growth, is changes in relationship with others. If we think about similar reactions here, or they'd learned to make decisions that had valued themselves, better able to handle relationships, better able to put boundaries in place, again, is an interesting one. Yes, thank you, Anna. Yeah, I think so. We either go growth or stress when it comes to family, I think. But I think what's really interesting about these changing relationships in others, some trauma that we experience can be because we allow other people to infiltrate our boundaries. It can be that other people infiltrate it, whether we allow it or not. But what we can find with trauma, certain trauma can actually help us create more healthier boundaries with people in our lives of what we are prepared to accept and what we aren't. Getting out. Thank you, Jane. Absolutely. I am no longer going to put up with this. Absolutely. And that will be potentially, if I just go back one, the change in perceptions of self, as in I can handle this now. No, this is not appropriate. And also, as we've just said, changes in relationship with others. Good. Okay. The last one was changes in philosophy of life. And this is about, do I enjoy life more? Do I focus on what's important? Now, it's really interesting. I was doing a keynote at the Positive Psychology Conference in Iceland in end of June. And what's really interesting there was lots of talk about existential crises. Now, I have to say, I went to college when I was 16. I dropped out when I was 17. And I have to admit, lots of people would talk about all these isms, utilitarianism and existentialism and various other things. And I never understood them. I didn't feel I fit in. I didn't get it. I still don't. This is no joke, but in my entire life, I have probably looked up the word existentialism at least 50 times. I have looked it up 3 times since June, because it was talked about a lot at this Positive Psychology Conference, of a lot of people going through an existential crisis. And it's interesting that when we think about post-traumatic growth, one of the things kind of links to that, of people now on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily trauma, are reevaluating their life, their job. I don't want to do this high-paying job anymore that's stressful and meaning I can't spend time with the people that I love. Or actually, there's no meaning in my job. I'm getting out and I'm going to do something more meaningful. So that's one of the themes they found again around trauma, is people being able to actually transform the way they view life. Thanks, Jennifer. Brilliant. So does this make sense when you think about this changes in philosophy of life? It could be, and you'll see there the bottom one is an interesting one. Some people will become less religious if they've had a faith-based, and some people, the trauma will strengthen their religion. So when it talks about philosophy in life, it's not necessarily to do with religion at all, but interestingly, it can go either way. What's really important is it changes our philosophy in life of, am I going to focus on what's more important, etc. And Chris, brilliant. Yes, so hope and optimism is about flipping our perspective. And this is a similar theme. Brilliant. All right. It can, Hannah. And I'm not suggesting everybody walks out and tries to attract some trauma in their life. But if we can help it shift our worldview, it can really help. Now, I haven't got time to go into it now, but there's some really good work going on by Joe Clifton and his team around world beliefs, primal beliefs. Do you think the world is good or bad, etc.? A whole bunch of different beliefs. You can actually jump online and do the little test if you like. What's really interesting is that trauma can shift our beliefs. It can challenge our beliefs, if you like. Existential phenomenological therapy. Oh, Moira. See, I can barely say that, let alone think about it. I like to come down to normal basic words. I love it. Is it more difficult for people to experience PTG if the trauma has been chronic? Yeah, and there was a question about chronic pain as well. That can be an interesting one, because when it's chronic, when it's ongoing, it's hard to get out of it. And again, I'll give you an example. So we run a diploma of positive psychology and wellbeing, and we were doing a session with a group fairly recently around relationships, forgiveness, etc. And because the person is still caught up in what was an abusive relationship, they've kind of got out, but there's children involved. So, you know, those sorts of things. It's actually hard to move on. So we may find if it's chronic, whether it's pain that's constantly there, we have to figure out other strategies. And we may not get to post-traumatic growth, but we might figure out other strategies. And again, I've got a lovely diploma student who does experience chronic pain, and she has built in strategies that really work for her, of practicing mindfulness in a particular way, of what she does with her physiology, of how she distracts herself, moves on, those sorts of things. So I'm not sure that's a complete answer to your question, but thank you. All right, I know I've only got a little while left. I'm going to run out of time.